Hello friends, I am back again. I am your course instructor Shubhra Sinha and we are going to do lecture 3 of module 10 of the stress management course. In this module we are talking about different kind of defense mechanisms which people adopt in order to reduce their stress, mainly by focusing on moderating their emotions. In this series, we have talked about a number of defense mechanisms in lecture 1 and 2 and we will learn some more in this particular lecture. So, I have brought a list of the defense mechanisms we are going to talk about and these are projection, regression, repression, schizoid fantasy, anticipation and compensation. Let us go through them one by one. So, we will begin with the defense mechanism of projection. Projection means imposing one's own unhealthy impulses, one's own negative emotions, one's own impairing behaviors onto someone else. So, if I do not like somebody, I would rather say that he or she does not like me. If I am cheating, I would say that all others were cheating, everybody was cheating. That is why there are some people who are more suspicious and they start suspicion about a number of negative things whenever they interact with people, because they are projecting their own negative feelings to other people they meet or interact with. In this particular defense mechanism, an individual blames others for their own unacceptable thoughts, feelings or behavior to avoid the responsibility of having such negative things. Example can include excusing others of having thoughts or feelings they themselves possess and deflecting criticism by attributing their own flaws to someone else. Means the criticism which was due to me, actually I am trying to displace it, project it towards someone else, that I did not do it, instead other people did that. The function of projection mainly include avoiding guilt or shame by attributing negative qualities to someone else and maintaining a positive self-image. The consequences of it may include strained relationship, because I have developed a habit of blaming other people for my own deeds. There may be a lack of self awareness, because instead of introspecting myself honestly, I am trying to hide my mistakes, I am trying to hide my shortcomings and projecting them to someone else. If I am not ready to accept my own shortcomings, I will never be able to work on them and improve them in future also. So, I will be committing the same kind of mistake again and again. I will put myself in same kind of troubles again and again by simply not realizing that the fault lies in me. Rather, I will keep on finding faults in others only. The next important and popular defense mechanism is of regression. Regression means whenever we find an emotion which is highly painful, with a situation which is highly stressful, I goes back to an earlier developmental stage. Friends, if you are aware of the process of child development or human development, you will find that human development progresses through distinct stages. All these stages are supposed to be universal, that is all individuals living in any part of the world, belonging to any culture, will go through these stages in the same sequence. So, what happens that I have progressed through certain stages, but I find myself in a stressful situation, and due to that intense stress or to avoid that intense stress, I simply regress back to an earlier developmental stage. Okay, let me give you an example. Have you ever noticed some students chewing their pencils or nails or engaged in nail biting behavior while solving a difficult maths problem? You must have. This nail biting behavior or chewing somebody's pencil or pen indicates regression. What happens that when the child is very young, there is a stage known as oral stage, where manipulation of the oral cavity, that is stimulating the mouth cavity in any way, is the main source of deriving pleasure, and it is very soothing and relaxing for the child. That is why very young children, maybe around age 1 year, they try to keep everything they see or find in their mouth. They try to taste it, they try to bite it, they try to chew it. The same behavior can reappear in some people in face of stress. Even smoking is an altered form of this stimulation of mouth cavity behavior. So, similar kind of regressive behaviors can be found many times. You might have noticed that children who are 10 years or 12 years back, whenever they are in intensely stressful situation, maybe the teacher scolds them, or they have a very poor test performance, or the grades are not according to their expectation, or they have a fight with their best friends, they simply come and they hug their mother and they try to hide in the lap of their mother, a behavior which is usually shown by young children, not children of their own age. All these things indicate regressing back to an earlier developmental stage in order to get relaxation, in order to get a feeling of safety, or simply to get away from the stress they are currently feeling. This is the basic idea of regression. Now, what is the function of regression? When you go back to an earlier developmental stage, you become more dependent on others. In early childhood years, children are completely dependent on their parents. So, if there is a problem with children, they are not supposed to handle it themselves, rather their parents would intervene and solve the problem for them. They will do the difficult task for them, and when everything becomes smooth, they will take it up again. So, the same kind of thing happens when a person, an adult, indulges in regression. They try to move back to a more dependent stage so that the coping, the responsibility of coping can be shifted to other people around them, and it does not lie on their own shoulders. But what are the consequences of regression? Of course, it gives you temporary relief, but finally it makes you maladjusted because you develop unrealistic expectations from other people. If you try to look at other people to solve your problem all the time, it would be a kind of burden for them. They will have impaired relationships with the person who engages in such kind of behavior, and it also leads to lack of self growth, because the person is not ready to learn the problem solving skills himself. Rather, it simply goes back to an earlier stage of development and start depending on others to do it for him. The next defense mechanism is repression. Repression means whatever unwanted, unacceptable, painful feelings or memories we have, we try to press it so hard so that it goes deep down to our unconscious mind and we should become unaware of it completely. This is very closely similar to the process of suppression, but there is a big difference between the two. In suppression, we press the unwanted painful memories and emotions, but it is a sort of effortful forgetting. I don't want to remember all those things again and again. I don't want them to come to my mind again and again, so I divert my attention to something else. I make myself busy, preoccupied with other kind of activities and behaviors, so that I am left with no spare time and cognitive resources to think about such issues. However, I am very well aware of the presence of such memories and emotion within me. But in case of repression, if I press it so hard, I may simply forget about a few days or an event or something which is intensely painful to me, as it is now buried into the unconscious mind, and the unconscious mind of a person is not available for conscious scrutiny. It usually expresses itself through dreams or through automatic behaviors. So, this is another kind of defense mechanism that can be utilized to reduce stress, although this is not a very effective mechanism, as the painful things which I have buried in my unconscious mind would keep daunting me in dreams and in other kind of psychological complications which I am expected to suffer from in future. Schizoid fantasy is another kind of defense mechanism. When my reality is very stressful, I simply withdraw myself from the real world and my inner fantasy based world, imagination based world expands. So, instead of living in the present moment in the reality, I would simply sink into a virtual world which is created in my imagination, where everything happens according to my own wish. So, I am the commander of that world. I would interact with people the way I want. I can do anything in that imaginative world. You know why we enjoy the Bollywood style movies, the typical masala movies, which is full of fantasies and dance and fight scenes and everything? Because for the time being, it detaches me from the hardships of my life, because it takes me away to a world of fascination and fantasy, where I can forget about the problems which are continuously teasing me, about the realities, about the emotions or the things which are continuously causing pain and agony to me. The same thing happens in schizoid fantasy, but of course there is nothing outside. When we are watching movie, there is a thing which is going on in the external world, and we get ourselves subsumed with that particular thing. But if there is nothing and I am simply sitting and imagining, I am completely withdrawn from my real world and engaged in some sort of imaginative behavior or interaction with the person. This would be an example of schizoid fantasy. If this become extreme, if it expands more and more, it may cause schizoid personality disorder. Then comes splitting. Splitting is basically an effort to look at a situation, to look at a person, to look at an object in a very dual manner, in terms of white and black, either good or bad. This type of defense mechanism is adopted when one tries to avoid dealing with complex emotions. What happens that most of the time the people around us or the situations in which we are or the objects that we have at hand with which we deal, they have certain positive things and certain negative things. There are certain advantages, certain disadvantages, and this is the truth of the life. There is nothing which is completely good or completely bad. There is a combination. We label the things good or bad depending upon their predominant characteristics. If most of the characteristics are good, we will label it good. If most of the characteristics are bad, we will label them bad. But we must realize that every person, situation or object has both kind of characteristics, good and bad, in it. But we do not want to get into the complex analysis of such nuances or such difficult emotions. So, I simply try to uh, put a label of good or bad over things, and this is a kind of oversimplification of the situation. What happens when I try to look at the world in black and white manner? I intentionally overlook certain aspect of the person, situation or the object. If I am trying to look at everything as good, I am going to mask the negative side. If I am perceiving everything as bad, I try to overlook the positive aspect that they have, because whenever we realize that both positive and negative things are there, it is a kind of problem in making attitude, in developing attitude towards that particular thing. If I am not efficient enough to manage my emotion, to analyze the complex situation and derive successful appropriate inferences out of them, obviously I am going to suffer from the complexity of the situation, and then I will try to oversimplify it. This is the process of splitting. Then there are some higher level defense mechanisms. Higher level defense mechanisms means defense mechanisms which are not really bad, rather they have a high level of adaptive capacity. For example, anticipation. Anticipation means trying to predict what can happen in future if the situations continue to be like this. We all use this behavior in problem solving and in planning as well. People who believe in proactive coping means taking coping steps even before the situation arises, so that they can handle it efficiently, depends on this particular mechanism of anticipation. And everybody who is considered to be a very good planner, or a person who believes in preparing for the future nicely, everybody depends on this particular behavior. So, we try to predict certain aspects of the situation, we try to foresee the consequences of an action, and we prepare ourselves accordingly. So, if a particular type of thing is about to happen in future, or this can happen in future, I must be mentally and physically ready to deal with the scenarios, right. So, this can be an effective coping mechanism for stress reduction. This gives us an opportunity to regulate our emotions also, because if I know I can be in a bad shape, if I know I can feel some sort of negative emotions, I get more time to manage my emotions. Suppose I get to know that I have to undergo a major surgery, it immediately triggers a feeling of fear inside me, because surgical operations are always anxiety prone for all of us, for most of us, and we are always worried about our health conditions. So, if I am able to anticipate it a little bit prior to actually when the doctor asks me to do so, I can get more time to identify the positive aspects of undergoing surgery, to calm myself about the anxieties, to read more about that surgical procedure, about the cases which have been recovered successfully after the surgery, and this is going to help me out in order to regulate my own emotions. Then this is a popular strategy for those who appear for job interviews. They make a simulation of the interview setting. They start anticipating the questions that the interviewer may ask and then practice answering those questions. So, the functional value of this particular technique is high. The same is true for compensation also. If I know that I am lacking in certain aspect and I can't do much to improve the situation, I can work on the other aspects of my personality or my behavior or the skill set, so that if there is a shortcoming at one hand, I can compensate it with surplus supply on the other hand. This is the basic idea behind compensation. So, whenever we get reduced grades on one paper, we may try to secure good grades in other papers we are more comfortable with, so that the overall grade on the mark sheet does not affect it badly. Okay. So, compensation is also a popular defense mechanism, and this is a useful defense mechanism also. It redirects our energy from hovering around a weakness and regretting about it to strengthening a positive side of us. Okay, grooming about an aspect which is already my strength, which is already good in me, and I can develop it more so that I can compensate for my shortcomings. It also helps maintaining my self-esteem high. So, this was all about these popular defense mechanisms. Let us have a quick recap: projection, regression, anticipation and compensation. Of course, repression was also there. So, these 5 defense mechanisms were there in this presentation, and we saw how and when we adopt these defense mechanisms and what could be their probable consequence for us with respect to the reduction of stress. As always, I have a long list of recommended readings. I provide a number of options so that you can select them according to your own convenience. Whatever is available to you can be picked. You can go through the library resources as well as resources available on internet. Thank you very much for your kind attention.